All right, what's up, everyone? Back at the Bama Insider YouTube account. Talk a little bit about this upcoming weekend for the Crimson Tide. Everybody's back from vacation, so it seems like everybody's back to the back to full force on the recruiting scene. Time to kind of keep an eye on what's happening with the Crimson Tide, and just before the start of fall practice. Fall practice begins here, in the next week or so, and coaches are trying to get as many top prospects on campus as they can. We've seen the entire month of July as a dead period, and now that's ending. Recruits are being able to go back on college trips and see campuses one last time before their season starts, before fall practice begins. Everybody's going to be just so kind of zoned in on their team, high school wise, college wise. Everybody's just getting ready for the season. So Alabama's trying to get some top kids on campus this weekend before things get going, and it's kind of difficult because you've got just so many things that are going on in such a short time frame. You've got so many different schools having big events, whether they're barbecues or just just invites to campus, just to see the campus one final time. So a lot of these schools are fighting and competing against other programs throughout the entire country, and a lot of kids aren't visiting places. A lot of kids are just taking the weekend off before fall practice begins, or they may be starting fall practice already. So we've got a lot of kids who've told me that over the course of the last few days they're not going to be able to take any visits. IMG Academy looks like they're not allowing any of their kids to take any visits this weekend. Per their head coach, all the kids just arrived back in the town, and they're trying to keep the kids together this weekend. So that's a lot of kids that aren't going to be visiting college campuses. But there's still going to be a lot of visits taking place. A lot of top kids throughout the country are going to be taking final trips this weekend, including several who are going to be visiting Alabama. And probably the guy that everybody wants to talk about, at least on the Alabama site, is Darnell Wright, the number one offensive lineman in the country, number one offensive tackle. He is the number 2 overall player in the Rivals 100. He will be in Tuscaloosa this weekend, and we've known about this visit for a while, probably since the spring when he took that visit, but we were asked to kind of keep it under wraps just because he was going to be setting up some trips this summer. He was going to take some visits in June, but was really wanting to take that final visit of the summer to Alabama, and he's making it to Tuscaloosa on Friday and going to be in town Friday all the way through Sunday. So it's not just a one-day visit and then he may go somewhere else. This is a full weekend in Tuscaloosa. And he's also coming in with his mom. This is going to be his mom's first visit to Alabama, which is going to be huge because she's already visited a few other schools like Tennessee and Ohio State. So she knows what those programs have to offer. And this weekend she'll get an opportunity to kind of find out a little bit more about Alabama. Obviously, she probably sees what the Alabama program is all about, from different videos or watching the team on television, but actually getting on campus and learning more about the academics. Also, probably spending time with Miss Terry. Miss Terry is such a big recruiter and a big part of helping get kids to Alabama just by winning over the parents. I think that's going to be a big help this weekend. So getting Darnell Wright on campus one more time, even before he takes his official visit to Alabama. This is just going to be an unofficial visit. So you never know how many more times he's going to make it back to Tuscaloosa. Maybe one more time, maybe 2 more times. But we know for sure he'll be back for an official visit. So getting him on campus, certainly huge for Alabama, one of Alabama's top overall offensive linemen. I guess overall prospects in this 2019 class, a guy that they really want to add. To kind of go along with this really good offensive line class that they've put together so far. Another big visitor coming in this weekend is Christian Harris, the inside linebacker. Just outside of Baton Rouge, is going to be making a trip back to Tuscaloosa. And this is Christian's probably 7th or 8th trip to Tuscaloosa this year alone. He's visited Alabama so many times. Certainly a guy that Alabama has really liked for a long time, has been on their radar. We saw him at the Mobile Rivals camp earlier in the spring, and we knew he was an athlete. We knew he played wide receiver. He played defensive back. And at that camp, he actually worked out at wide receiver, even though he's 6'1.5", about 230 pounds. He worked out at receiver, so didn't get a chance to really see him work at linebacker, the position most schools are recruiting him to play, until we saw him at the 5-Star Challenge in Atlanta a couple weeks ago. Or I guess it's been a little bit longer than a couple weeks ago, as it was in late June. But we really liked him a lot out there. I thought he did really well. I mean, got great instincts, has great athleticism. He's a big, thick kid. I think he's got a chance to be a really, really good college football player at the next level. Alabama, as I said, has been on him for a very long time, and this is going to be his 2nd trip to Tuscaloosa this summer. He was at Alabama earlier in June. Didn't make it to the first cookout, but definitely didn't want to miss the second one. So that's another big visitor for Alabama this weekend, Christian Harris. A third guy that I really like a lot is Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale was one of those very pleasant surprises at Alabama's first camp of the summer. Alabama really isn't going to have a big wide receiver class. They picked up John Mechie out of New Jersey a couple weeks ago. Big commitment for them. And kind of the plan early on was no more than 3 wide receivers. Well, now they may not take any more than 2 wide receivers in this class. And they've always kind of hoped on getting a bigger type guy, a guy who's 6'3", 6'4", sort of like a George Pickens type, or a Milton Wright out of Louisville. Jameson Williams has been on that list for a while, and they're still kind of looking around for some different prospects, see who's all still out there. But Wan'Dale Robinson is certainly a kid that they like a lot. That really kind of just stole the show at Alabama's camp during the summer, and they extended him an offer. And I think they've, after all the camps that happened in June, they kind of went back to the drawing board, kind of figure out, this is a position that this guy's in. These guys need to commit elsewhere, commit to us before we decide on making a decision. And I think Alabama kind of has a good idea of where kids rank on their recruiting board right now. After all those camps in June, seeing different kids make decisions, whether for Alabama or going somewhere else, I think they've kind of made a decision as to the key guys that they want to go after over the course of the next few months. Leading up until that first signing day in December. And I certainly believe Wan'Dale Robinson is one of those guys that they like a lot, that they would probably go ahead and take a commitment from, just because he's just such an explosive kid. I mean, we saw him at the 5-Star Challenge in Atlanta a few weeks ago. It was extremely impressive. I mean, nobody could guard him one-on-one. He's got great speed, great burst, runs incredible routes. I mean, I was just blown away by this kid. He's a little bit on the small side. I mean, we talked about Alabama really trying to go after some bigger receivers, the 6'3", 6'4" type guys. Well, he's not 6'3" or 6'4". He's only about 6, right under 6 feet tall, and he may be closer to 5'9". I mean, he's not really that big of a cat, but he can certainly play, and obviously he plays a lot bigger than his size. Reminds me a lot of Christian Kirk coming out of high school. I mean, I think. I know that's a lofty comparison, but he was just outstanding, and we might compare him a little bit more to Jalen Waddell, which is also a lofty comparison. The 5-star receiver signed by Alabama last year, but he was just outstanding at the 5-Star Challenge, and was outstanding at the Rivals, at the Alabama camp earlier this summer. So certainly a kid to keep a close eye on. especially this weekend, coming back to campus. Does Alabama make a push for him to go ahead and jump on board and kind of maybe really close down that receiver class? I mean, obviously, I think that they would perhaps take somebody down the road, but going ahead and getting 2 elite receivers on board with Mechie, and if they could go ahead and get Wan'Dale Robinson, I think they'd certainly be open to that. Some of the other guys that are coming in are mainly guys who are commitments. We're going to see a lot of kids who are committed to Alabama coming in town, and which is going to be huge in a lot of ways. It gives them an opportunity to spend more time with the coaching staff, spend more time with the players, get accustomed to everything. We're going to see a lot of guys who have been to Tuscaloosa so many times. Obviously, guys like Pierce Quick, Paul Tyson, King Wakuda. Those guys have been in Tuscaloosa a lot of times. Brandon Turnage, also another kid who's been to Alabama a lot of times. Shane Lee, inside linebacker, one of the top linebackers in the country out of Baltimore, making his first trip back to Alabama since his commitment back in late. I guess it's been since April. Committed to Alabama in April. Going to make his first visit back to Tuscaloosa this weekend, so that's going to be huge. But not only are they going to be able to spend more time with the coaches, get accustomed to everything, but they're also going to be on campus to help recruit some of these guys that are on campus this weekend. As I mentioned, Darnell Wright, Christian Harris, Wan'Dale Robinson. I spoke to Tyrion Davis, the LSU commitment 4-star running back out of Baton Rouge just the other day. Now, he's on about 3 visit lists for the weekend, and he may be trying to go to as many schools as he can, kind of knock it all out from Friday to Sunday. He told me that he's going to be in Tuscaloosa on Saturday. So, we'll see if he ends up making it to campus. Maybe he ends up going to a few different schools and maybe flips the dates around. But I do expect him to be in Tuscaloosa this weekend. I want to get to a few questions real quick that were on the site. We Are the Tide. You came on there and asked, any chance Kamar Bell as a gray shirt or blue shirt candidate if Clay Webb, Darnell Wright, Evan Neal end up going elsewhere? That's a really good question. Kamar Bell was one of those kids who got offered by Alabama during the spring. He plays at Colquitt County High School in Moultrie, Georgia, home of Rush Propst, head coach. Definitely a powerhouse program over there. He's an interior guy. He's one of those kids that is not going to play on the outside. He's going to play either guard or center. He went to Alabama's camp in June and did extremely well. And, the biggest issue here is numbers at the offensive line position. And Alabama has 3 offensive line commitments right now, still going after guys like Clay Webb, Darnell Wright, Evan Neal, as you mentioned. And I think that if I do believe that if let's say Clay Webb decides to go elsewhere, if he decides to go to Clemson or Georgia or wherever it may be, I do think Alabama will extend an offer to Kamar Bell because they do want another inside guy in this class, and he's certainly a guy that they like a lot. So we'll keep an eye on that. I think it's only probably if Clay Webb ends up going elsewhere. Darnell Wright and Evan Neal, both outside guys, both tackle types. So if Alabama gets Clay Webb, I don't know if they'll take Kamar Bell, even if they miss on those other 2 guys. But we'll kind of keep an eye on that and see what happens. But he'll definitely still be on Alabama's radar. They'll still be recruiting him because Clay Webb's a long way off from making a decision. And Alabama's probably not going to just only recruit him. There's going to be some other guys that they want to recruit just in case he ends up going elsewhere. My next question comes in from my boys. Am I still thinking Bama for Dax Hill? I do think Alabama is in his top 2. And I've been saying Alabama, Oklahoma for a long time because that's what most people really assume, that it was between those 2 schools. And I don't know if that's the case anymore. If he doesn't make it to Norman this weekend for their cookout, barbecue, whatever it is they're calling it, I don't think Oklahoma stands much of a chance. And that's kind of hard to say just because it always felt like he would end up possibly at Oklahoma. Oklahoma's having a very, very good recruiting year. but he just hasn't visited Norman that much. So we'll see if he ends up making it over there. As of right now, he does not plan on visiting. It's starting to look like it's an Alabama-Michigan battle, just from talking to several sources. And it's close. I mean, it seems like one day it's Michigan, one day it's Alabama. So it looks like he'll make a decision early August. Keep an eye on it. And Alabama's still in good shape with some other safety types, some other defensive backs. They have 3 different defensive backs currently committed. So I think even if Dax Hill does go somewhere else, they'll still be okay. But no doubt they want to add him. They think he's a first round All-American type kid, and he can make a big impact. And he's going to make a big impact wherever he goes. I mean, he's one of the best safety prospects that I've seen in a couple years, and I think he's a very special talent. Another question that came in from my boys was chances we get one of Wright and Neal. Speaking of Evan Neal and Darnell Wright, 2 of the top offensive tackles in the country. Well, Alabama will get one of those guys. I certainly think so. I'd be shocked if they did not get one of those guys. And there's a good possibility they could get both. Going to be tough because once you see you get one of those guys on board, the other may start looking at, they've got this many guys at the offensive tackle position. I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go somewhere else. You never know if that plays much of a factor, but it's certainly certainly something kids consider. But Alabama certainly would love to add both of those guys, Evan Neal and Darnell Wright. But I certainly think that they'll get one of those guys in the end. Another question that came in from WK Stark. Who's a dark horse that isn't talked about who could end up in Alabama's class? It's hard to say because there's so many kids that we talk about on a daily basis at every single position. I mean, I always toss out, different names, even when, they may not have an offer, or they may not have visited in a while. So it's hard to say there's a dark horse. Could there end up being a kid that gets offered down the road? Absolutely. I mean, we've seen kids like that happen all the time. Eddie Jackson, Eddie Smith, just last year, so there's kids who are going to get offers. There are kids who are going to be watched. And a lot of people think it's because Alabama or any other schools may have, they may have, missed out on a kid, or they may have, may have lost ground with somebody, and they think another kid's going somewhere else. That's not always the case. Alabama and a lot of other schools are evaluating kids year round. They don't just say, okay, well, you've got to be a junior. Once you hit your junior year, we're gonna recruit you, and that's it. You can be a senior. You can have a great senior season. You may have missed your junior season with an injury. You may have missed it because you just decided to sit out for a year. I mean, that's kind of stuff happens, and then you just don't emerge as a football prospect until after your senior season. Once you start sending out that film, and some schools may not have room for you, but some schools might. And Alabama could be one of those schools. And I think that's they've done such a good job of evaluating kids year round and taking kids later in the process. Eddie Smith last year, there was 3 or 4 5-star defensive backs who had very high interest in Alabama, and Alabama was able to sign Patrick Surtain Jr. But there were some other guys, some West Coast kids who had a lot of interest in Alabama. But Eddie Smith became that big-time guy that they wanted, and he was a 3-star kid. Eddie Jackson, same way. We saw some kids his senior year that were ranked higher than him, who were heavily recruited by Alabama for so long, but then all of a sudden Eddie Jackson became a kid after his senior season, a higher priority than these other 5-star kids. Of course, everybody thinks, it's because they're not going to get that 5-star. Not always the case. Sometimes it is. I mean, I'm not saying that Alabama offers kids regardless, but there's definitely some situations where that's not the case. Got a question that came in. Top option at middle linebacker if we don't land Nakobe Dean. It's tough to say. There's definitely some kids that they like that are out there. Christian Harris, and I'm not saying Alabama will only take Dean. I think there's a good possibility that they take 2 more inside guys. And Christian Harris, Certainly one of those guys that I think they've got a great chance to land. We'll see how the visit goes with him this weekend, because I think if things go extremely well, and maybe if Alabama pushes for a commitment, he might go ahead and jump on board. I know he really likes LSU and Texas A&M as well. Those are probably his top three schools. I know he also likes Auburn a little bit, but I think it ends up coming down to Alabama, LSU, and A&M for him. Ryan Davis, another kid that they like a lot out of Popka, Florida, visiting Georgia this weekend, and many people think that Georgia is the favorite for him. Visited Alabama back in June, and we'll see if he makes it back to Tuscaloosa in the fall. He told me he is. Told me he's going to set up an official visit for sometime in the fall. So that's another kid to keep an eye on. Now there's some West Coast kids that Alabama likes a lot. Henry Oda is one of those kids that they have a lot of high interest in out of De La Salle High School in California. Daniel Humula. Was one of those kids who visited Tuscaloosa a while back, but we'll see if he ends up making it back to Tuscaloosa in the fall. But still some options at inside linebacker, some guys that I feel like they've got a good chance to get down the road. So we'll see what happens. But really, this weekend, kind of the final weekend before fall practice begins, they're going to have a lot of top kids on campus, mainly kids who are committed. I know that, a little bit of a disappointment for some, but you're still having guys like Wan'Dale Robinson, Christian Harris, Darnell Wright, Tyrion Davis on campus. That's going to be huge because Alabama's going to be able to spend more time with those guys. That first cookout in June, it's kind of a madhouse. I mean, it's about 65, 70 kids at the cookout. So you didn't really get a lot of the one-on-one time with these kids. That's going to be a little bit different this weekend. The past few years, we've only seen about 30, 35 kids at these cookouts. It's never been like it was last month. And so we're going to see a big number this week, or a smaller number this weekend. We'll see some 2020 guys on campus. I think all but one of the 2020 guys that are committed right now to Alabama are coming into Tuscaloosa. The only one, Carson Beck, out of Jacksonville, told me he's not going to be able to make it. But we'll see Javier Morton, Jason Jones, Jackson Bratton. Those guys are going to be back on campus. Another kid in the 2020, or a couple kids in the 2020 class that I like that are coming on campus this weekend. Reggie Grimes. His father played at Alabama, defensive lineman. He got offered, I guess last month, about middle of the month, last month. It's about a month ago. He got offered by Alabama. He's about 6'5", 200-pound athlete. I think Alabama's still trying to figure out what position he's going to play at the next level. We're going to see Christian Story, one of the top athletes in the country out of Lynette High School in Alabama, currently committed to Tennessee. We'll see if Alabama starts making a push for him. We're seeing Alabama, kind of going after some of these in-state targets, doing such a good job recruiting in-state right now. This is one of the top kids in the 2020 class that went ahead and made an early decision for Tennessee. So we'll see. We always see kind of Alabama jump on these in-state kids late. I guess a little bit later than some others, but we'll see if he ends up getting an offer. Next question that came in: does Alabama still have a shot with Pickens, or are they moving on? They're still in the running for him. No doubt about it. I think there's some there's some things that they're trying to decide right now in terms of the wide receiver position, how many kids that they're going to take. And Pickens is such a special talent. It's kind of hard to ignore, especially if he says, "Hey, I want to come in for a visit," or "Hey, I want to schedule an official visit down the road." I don't think there's any doubt that Alabama would turn him away. They've liked him for a long time, but at the same time, it's they're probably not going to wait around. They want to get another wide receiver on board. And I think Wan'Dale Robinson probably has just as good of a chance of any of the wide receivers remaining to jump on board. So keep an eye on Wan'Dale Robinson this weekend. Do you think Alabama will land defensive tackle Rodney Sopsher as a walk-on? Ishmael Sopsher's brother. We'll see. A lot of people are asking about him lately. There's so many mixed signals here regarding the number one defensive tackle in the country, Ishmael Shropshire out of Louisiana. Every single person I've talked to seems to think he's LSU. We have a lot of posters on our site who say they have inside sources who believe he's going to Alabama. So and it seems like that's going on in many different on many different sites. A lot of people are saying Alabama. A lot of people are saying LSU. I think he's probably leaning LSU. Just because of the lack of trips to Tuscaloosa. He's visited LSU several times and hasn't visited Alabama since the spring. Missed that first cookout. Doesn't appear to be coming in to Tuscaloosa this weekend. So I'd be surprised if we end up seeing him as a heavy Alabama lean at some point. It would kind of just be out of nowhere if he announced for Alabama. But in my opinion, I think it's LSU. So he's going to have to prove me wrong to think it's Alabama. Let's see. Fatui Tuatele, please say you feel good about him. I feel good about him if Alabama presses for him. Alabama has had him on campus a few times already. Visited last month. He was on campus during the spring. One top defensive lineman in the country from the state of Hawaii. But the numbers are so tight right now, and there's still some guys that they're really wanting to get. And you have 4 really, really good defensive line commitments. And I think they'll end up signing 5, maybe 6. They really would like to flip DeMarvin Leal, Texas A&M commitment. Probably going to be hard to do, but they're still heavily involved with him. And I think, if he were to pick another school, I think it would be Alabama. But we're a long way from that happening, I believe. Ishmael Shropshire, obviously another big time target that they want to get. Nathan Pickering, still keeping in touch with Alabama, even though he's committed to Mississippi State. I think that they will at least get him back on campus for an official visit and at least a home game this year. So I think Alabama wants to kind of keep their options open before they make a big press to get another defensive tackle. If it's not Shropshire or Pickering or Siaki Ikea, big defensive tackle out of Utah that plans on visiting Alabama after the season. So still some defensive tackle targets out there that Alabama's involved with. So we'll see kind of what happens. Are we still recruiting Quavaris Crouch at running back or linebacker? He just hasn't shown a lot of interest in Alabama. I don't know the reason why. He always mentions Alabama as one of the schools that's high on his list and how he's keeping in contact with the coaching staff. But the lack of visits would be kind of a red flag for me. And thinking about a kid leaning towards Alabama, I just don't. I can't imagine him signing with Alabama, especially if he never makes the trip back to Tuscaloosa. So we'll keep an eye on him, see if he ends up making it back. But Alabama's recruiting him mainly as an athlete, just basically telling him, we'll let you play wherever you want to play. But I think he's probably best suited for defense once he gets to that next level. You asked if Christopher McLeod also asked if Daxton Hill, if we're in good shape with him. As I mentioned earlier, I certainly think that Alabama is very high on his list, along with Michigan. I think it's very close, closer than I would have imagined. If a month ago, I would have said 100%. I think Alabama is going to get his commitment if he was not going to take any more visits. And now it seems to be a little bit closer than what a lot of people originally assumed. I think Michigan certainly made a big push for him, and it's definitely a close race with them at this time. Andrew Bowen, is there anyone on commitment watch for the cookout? Yeah, absolutely. I think you've got to watch Wan'Dale Robinson, Christian Harris. Those would be my 2 guys to keep an eye on this weekend. I'd also watch Malachi Moore, 2020 defensive back out of Hewitt-Trussville, just because a lot of his teammates, I kept trying to say commitments. A lot of his teammates are committed to Alabama. Pierce Quick, Daz Worsham, Paul Tyson, all those guys are on Alabama's commitment board. And Malachi Moore earned an offer last month at the Tide's camp, and I'm sure that he's hearing it every single day. Hey, you need to go ahead and commit. You need to jump on board. So that's a kid. I mentioned Wandale Robinson and Christian Harris, two guys, two uncommitted guys who are coming into Tuscaloosa. If Alabama presses hard for them, kind of watch out. I think both of them could jump on board this weekend. Is anyone signed with Alabama from California this year? Probably not. I'd be surprised. Not really anybody that I see them. And I keep trying to think off the top of my head. Any kids from California that they're heavily recruiting. They offered Stephen Wright, defensive end out of California, a little while back, and I guess I forgot to mention Henry Oda, however you say it. Yeah, you guys know who I'm talking about, linebacker out of California. That could possibly be one of the kids that they end up getting. So that's someone to kind of keep an eye on. But anybody else, I don't see. Like I mentioned, Stephen Wright earned an offer at Alabama's camp back in June, but Alabama's picked up a few kids kind of similar to him since then, and I don't see him in this class. Now, he may end up taking a visit, but just don't see him joining the class at all. Over under on 5-star commitments for 2019. I'm guessing you're wanting me to pick the number for the over under. We'll see. 5 maybe. A lot depends on final rankings. Where do these kids end up ranking in the end? Kids are going to move down during the fall. When we see them at the All-Star games after the season's over. But you got to look at guys like Trey Sanders, Darnell Wright, Clay Webb. All 5-star kids who have a good chance to end up at Alabama. Dax Hill. Another one right there. And then, will any Alabama commitments move up? Maury Kite had a great performance at the 5-star challenge. How much higher will he move up? We may see him move up after the season instead of before, but I think he's got a chance. Pierce Quick, didn't get a chance to really see him this spring because he was hurt, but he may have a great senior season and good performance in an All-Star game and change a lot of minds. So we'll see if he ends up moving up. But I would probably set the number at 5, and it could hit it, could go over it. But Alabama's having such a great year that we'll see what ends up happening. Jeffrey Carter, DeMarvin Lill, any movement for Alabama? As I mentioned earlier about DeMarvin Lill, kind of tough. He's a Texas kid. They're certainly using. They would certainly be using that card. Keep the in-state guys in-state, playing the SEC in your home state. Alabama certainly has made a move for him. I certainly have. I certainly believe they have put themselves in contention with Texas A&M. But as of right now, is not flipping at this time, but we'll see what happens down the road. Jeffrey Carter, 4-star defensive back out of Texas, also very high on Alabama. It seems like he's been high on a lot of schools. So 1 week he's high on this school, 1 week he's high on that school. Looks like he's going to Oklahoma this weekend to visit the Sooners. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Oklahoma seems like they're gaining some momentum, but Texas A&M, Alabama, still very high on his list. Who do I think is Alabama's best commitment? Wow, that's a tough question because I think they've got a really, really good recruiting class on both sides of the football. Just about every single position. Offensive line's outstanding. I do think that Amari Kite could have potential for maybe possibly the highest ceiling of any kid. He is impressive. Defensive line, really like, Byron Young and Antonio Alfano. Those guys can be just, really good pass rushers at the defensive end position at the next level. Yeah, and I really like, the defensive back class. I think it's really strong as well. But yeah, if I had to pick probably three guys, in Pierce Quick also. I mean, I really like Pierce Quick a lot, and I just I'm wondering what position he's going to end up playing at the next level. I think he could potentially move inside to guard if he doesn't end up staying at tackle. But in terms of first round NFL draft pick talent down the road, I think you got to look at Amari Kite, Antonio Alfano, Byron Young. I think those guys. I think all those guys are pretty special players. Let's see here. See if we got any more questions on the site. But I think we're probably about finished. If anybody's got any more questions, gonna answer anybody. Kyle asked, what's the latest on Fatui Tuatele? As I mentioned earlier, nothing really different. I think that things are kind of just on standby with him right now. I think if Alabama wants him, they'll get him. Just got to kind of wait and see what happens with some other guys. And Alabama may be waiting to see, maybe who shows up this weekend. If any guys end up showing up this weekend for the at least on the defensive line, kind of see where some guys stand. Other than Mechie at receiver, who is Bama's top target? That was asked by Christopher McLeod. That's it's kind of to be determined. Does Alabama take another receiver, which I believe they will. And I've been saying for a while that they wanted to take 3 wide receivers. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think they want to get 2 and then kind of see what happens down the road. And I think Wan'Dale Robinson is very high on the list right now. Just after talking to some people and, Alabama going back to the recruiting board after all the camps and figuring out who their top targets are, I think Wan'Dale Robinson has certainly moved pretty high on their wish list. So let's keep an eye on him and see what happens with him this weekend, and then kind of go from there. William Lee, is Dean really interested in Florida State? Yeah, I think so. He's taking a visit down there this weekend. Nakobe Dean, number 1 linebacker in the country, as many of you know, taking I think it's just an unofficial visit down to Florida State this weekend. So, definitely some interest there. In the end, do I think he ends up going to Florida State? I don't. I think it's an Alabama-Georgia battle. LSU certainly in the mix as well, but in the end, I think he picks between Alabama and Georgia. Who is the top player on Alabama's recruiting board? Well, they got a top player at each position. I don't know if they want to. I don't know if they would say who they have overall, the number 1 absolutely overall guy that they can't miss on. But I think you've got to look at position-wise, and I think inside linebacker is such a important position. I mean, they've been able to get some guys at all these other positions, and I think Dax Hill certainly at safety would be a home run if Alabama was able to get him on board. But getting another inside linebacker, or even 2 more inside linebackers, is very, very important to Alabama's recruiting class this year. They have one in Shane Lee, but they really need to get another one. That's why I think Nakobe Dean is just such an important piece to this puzzle. I mean, Alabama fans see that they have the number 1 recruiting class in the country, but it doesn't really matter if you can't meet your needs. You've got to meet your needs. Inside linebacker is a major, major need. And I think with Alabama still going after some really good tackles in this class, they want to get another tackle, whether that's Darnell Wright, Evan Neal, or both of those guys. And then, I certainly think that they would love to get at least another pass rusher. Kayvon Thibodeau, certainly high on that list. If they can get him on board, that would be huge. And obviously another, they really want to get another defensive lineman. So we'll see who they can end up getting. Can that be DeMarvin Leal? Can that be Ismail Sopsher, or somebody else? And I don't think we're going to know regarding the defense, another defensive line commitment for a long time. I think most of those guys are planning on waiting until after the season to make a decision. How do I feel about Kayvon Thibodeau? I think Alabama's in good shape. He's visited a few times, but he's also visited Florida State a few times, and he's going down to Florida State again this weekend. So he's made 2 trips to Alabama and Florida State. So I think it's really, really close between those two schools. And I'm sure the West Coast, there's some West Coast schools that he's interested in, but just from the different conversations that I've seen from him and his interviews, it seems like it's an Alabama Florida State battle. So I think he's going to wait a while. You probably don't want him to commit before the season because he's certainly going to have Florida State fresh on his mind after that trip this weekend. So we'll keep an eye on him, but I don't think he'll decide until probably after his senior season. But yeah, I think it's Alabama and Florida State for him. What do I think about Ben Davis? I always liked Ben. I thought that Ben would have an outstanding career in Tuscaloosa. I mean, based on the high number of kids that I see every single year, and I've been doing this for 15 years now, which is crazy. And Ben Davis, I would have guessed that he would have had an unbelievable career. I mean, he was great I remember, you see him at the high school level, you see him go to different camps, and people say, oh, you can't watch kids during the camp scene, you need to watch them go play. Well, I go watch him go play. I watched him play. He was outstanding at the high school level. Oh, well, he plays for a low classification. Okay, well, I'm gonna go watch him play at the Alabama Mississippi All-Star game. Oh, he was fantastic. He was the best player on the field. Oh, still, how good can he be? Well, he goes and plays in the Under Armour All-America game. He's making tackle after tackle. So he had an unbelievable high school career. You kind of think, okay, that's going to translate pretty well to once he gets to college. He's going to be able to adapt and pick it up pretty quick. He just hasn't been able to pick it up. Now, I hope he is able to do that, because you always say you don't want a kid to be a bust. You want a kid to succeed, especially kids that you had high hopes for, kids that you ranked high, kids that you believe have the best opportunity to be a first-round NFL draft pick. And he has all the intangibles. He just has to put it all together. And if not, of course, at Alabama, if you can't pick it up, somebody else will, because somebody else is waiting in line, and they're just as good. So Alabama's able to recruit at such a high level every single year that that if you can't pick it up, they've got somebody else waiting in the wings who was a 5 or 4-star type kid coming out of high school as well. Any more help coming in the secondary? And is Akeem Dent is Bama in the picture for Akeem Dent? Alabama's still recruiting a lot of secondary players. That they'd love to get one more safety, one more cornerback, but I think at least one more defensive back overall. And we'll have an answer from Dax Hill within the next couple of weeks what he's going to do. So Alabama kind of know where things stand with him. Jeffrey Carter, defensive back out of Texas, that they've had a lot of high interest in. Should know something with him relatively soon. Noah Pola Gates out of Arizona, another kid they really like a lot. That visited last month, spent 4 days in Tuscaloosa. You got Nick Cross, who's up there in Maryland. Teammates with DeMarco Hellams, an Alabama commitment right now. So there's other defensive backs who are still out there. And Alabama offered DJ James, an in-state kid out of Spanish Fort, last month. So they've got a few backup options right now, and I think they're going to wait and see what happens with a few of these guys before they kind of make moves on some others. So we'll see what happens, but I definitely think that Alabama gets at least one more, possibly two more defensive backs in this class. Who do I think Bama starts at wide receiver? I'm sure Ruggs is number one. Who besides Smith and Judy? You're going to probably have to come back and ask Kyle those questions, or Tony. I don't, as much as I watch Alabama football, I don't pay a ton of attention to the fall camp scene. Obviously I know about Judy and Ruggs and Devontae, and think that those guys are going to be very special. I also think it's going to be very hard to keep Jalen Waddell off the field this year. 5-star wide receiver coming in, considered one of the best, probably one of the best slot guys in the entire country. I think he's got a chance to make an impact. And we'll see who else comes in and does well. Tyrell Shavers didn't play last year, but was part of that freshman class. big receiver, 6'6", over 200 pounds, could come in and have an impact right away as well. So Alabama's certainly not hurting at the receiver position, and they're all young guys. All right. Well, I think that's all I'm going to do today, guys. We talked about the cookout this weekend. Please stay tuned to the Alabama Bama recruiting board. I'm posting all the updates regarding the camps. The list of all the kids that are coming in for the cookout. We'll keep that as updated as possible. I've got different kids who are texting me, letting me know. And I'm talking to other guys at different various websites, getting their list of who they expect to come in this weekend for their cookouts or whatever they're having. And we'll have plenty of stuff coming out, though. Just kind of a look at the overall weekend. If you have any other questions, please ask me on the Bama Insider board. You guys know I'm on there, just about every waking moment of the day. So you're not really hurting for waiting on me to ask you questions or respond to your questions. So please jump on there. And as always, thanks for coming, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks.